Well, it's now 6 o'clock, and it's time to call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting of Tuesday, February 11th. All commissioners are here except Commissioner Dower. Do you have an excuse? Had you got an excuse from him? No, I had no excuse either, okay. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We can move right into item number 4, the citizen comment period. We have one citizen who signed up, Martha Stipp. Ms. Stipp, if you will, please. I know you're familiar with the format.
Good evening. My name is Martha Stipp. I live at 21007 Cedar Branch in Garden Ridge Estates. I'm here tonight because I understand that the commission is going to very soon present to the new council, the new rewrites for our ordinances. And I'm here regarding the current ordinance 23. In 2002, the Supreme Court heard a case, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society versus the Village of Stratton, commonly referred to as Watchtower. In this case, the court struck down a Stratton, Ohio ordinance making it a misdemeanor to canvass or solicit door-to-door without first receiving a permit from the city. The opinion written by Justice Stevens said that the ordinance violated the First Amendment protection for anonymous political speech, religious and political canvassing, and pamphleteering. The opinion stated that the Constitution protects anonymous advocacy. I have provided the city secretary with an article that explains the law in full. The new rewrite needs to remove the permit requirement from Ordinance 23. Also, I would like to remind the commission of the problem with Ordinance 55's time limit of 30 days for displaying temporary signs that I discussed with you a few months ago. It also violates the First Amendment protection of free speech. The Supreme Court case of Reed v. Gilbert spoke of allowing time limits to commercial temporary signage. Since you can no longer judge a sign by its content, there's no way to determine whether a temporary sign has limited commercial message or an expression of an opinion. There is strict scrutiny applied by the courts to protecting free speech like this. Therefore, placing a time limit of 30 days to a sign expressing opinions is too restrictive. City planners that do seminars suggest that there be no time limit applied to temporary signs. This new rewrite of Ordinance 55 should not have the 30-day time limit in it. Now, when you have ordinances that get more restrictive, and believe me, I appreciate the job that y'all do. I can't even imagine how hard it is with all of the legalities that you have to do. But when it gets more restrictive, then you also run the risk of it being intrusive into our basic rights of free speech and other free rights. Vetting new ordinances for compliance with the First Amendment could save the city down the road from possible costly litigation. Both my daughter and my son-in-law are attorneys, and so I've kind of like gotten an interest in law, and I know from their experience that they do not know only their area of law. So these need to be vetted by a specialist in First Amendment rights to make sure you're not violating freedom of speech, because that can cost the city a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stipp. There being nobody else signed up to speak, we'll move on to business item, number 5, which is the business items. First area of discussion is approval of the minutes from January 14th meeting. I trust all the commissioners had time to peruse those minutes. Were there any changes that anybody noted on the left, on the right? I'll entertain a motion for approval then.
So moved.
I'll second.
I got a approval with Who made the motion? Dave, and approved, second by Ms. Owens. Okay. Second business item B. Oh, I'm sorry.
Real quick, can you take a vote on that
Yes,
motion?
yes.
Thank you.
I skipped over a step. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? No. Unanimously, everybody agrees with the approval. Moving on to business item 5B. In attendance, I was in attendance at the city council meeting. There was nothing passed down from the city council meeting that pertained particularly to planning and zoning. Yes, there's another item. So there's nothing to bring back from city council. To planning and zoning. Business item 5B2. Ordinance 210, we discussed that. Refresh my memory, Karen. What did we decide? I remember we brought it up. I brought it up to them, but
And they voted to amend it. Or to
what I brought to the city council was to amend it so we don't have a.
did they repeal it and we have to redo, just amend?
So that was actually a resolution that was passed
Okay.
that set the days and the time for y'all's regular meeting, and they did approve to amend it
Okay.
and just have the Tuesday meeting effective starting March of this year.
Yes.
Ordinance 210, just to remind you, it's on here, it's on every commission's agenda, just in case something comes up that needs to be addressed, and say it was after the agenda was posted, whether it has to do with absences, anything of that nature, and the commission doesn't have any of that right now.
Okay. I stand corrected. Move on then to item 5B3, which is the discussion of the Freeze and Nichols input draft ordinance, which we want to spend most of the time on this evening talking about one way or the other. After looking at it, there's some corrections that I saw that jumped out at me. I'm sure there's other corrections that jumped out at some of my other commissioners. And I don't know how to go through it. I know we decided we didn't want to go through it page by page. Does anybody have a idea how they want to do it? By section, subsection by subsection? What do you want to do? Or you just want to, one commissioner goes through all of them, then another one come behind them, or how do you want to do it? Anybody got an idea? Jesse?
I gave Marissa my comment, my corrections, my
Okay.
typos, things like
So
that.
you gave her
So she has
the corrections,
So if
okay.
you look on your screen in front of you, these were from Commissioner Valdez, and I already corrected anything that is crossed out. Those were errors that were they were missed by Freeze and Nichols. And the first one, those words are used different throughout the ordinance. So basically, the commission just needs to decide, do you want to just say zoning district map? Just say zoning map? The definition at the end is cited there for you, so you could use either or, but I do recommend that we remove the word official and the word city from any of them, so we don't have 4 different phrases in there. And then there was one more about the transportation master plan. We do have one. It was adopted in 2009. It's discussed in the master land use plan. However, I was told that it is very outdated and needs some updating, which is one of the tasks of the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee, in which 2 people on this commission are a part of. So they will be examining that pretty soon. And then the other 2 things highlighted are things that I went through and just made sure for consistency edits basically right now.
Okay, so then using this as a template, then that, I don't want this to force us to do it by commissioner, Thank you, Jesse. I very appreciated your efforts and finding those improvements and corrections. But again, I don't want to force everybody else to go by commissioner by commission. Any other way? Does anybody have a better way to do it? Or should we do it by commissioner by commission? I'm waiting for input.
I think these are some big changes that was been noted, so we should address those immediately and get those settled. Those were some inconsistencies that I noticed as we were going through it. The other thing is maybe we ought to do like we did in the past, is we were able to flip through some pages and talk about highlights that each of us had noted and then move on. We were able to do that pretty fast. And that way we don't waste time on a one-on-one, because as we did one-on-one, that kind of drug it out. But we did that pretty fast last time, just flipping through pages. We could have same comments on each page. We could all address our comments and just move on.
I'm not sure I followed you with the first part of what you were suggesting in terms of.
Well, we have before us now two things that we need to make a decision on: zoning district map, our official map. We need to decide on these comments that was presented, that Mr. Valdez presented. So we need to decide on those. That's before us right now.
Okay. And I thought you said there were two.
I think there's some down on the bottom of that. Did you not say there was on the bottom of that graphic?
That was just addressing a question. He asked if we had a transportation master plan, because it's referred to in the end of the ordinance and the definitions.
And you're gonna address that in the new,
And I was just answering the question that, yes, we do have one, but it is going to be worked on, so there'll be an updated one.
and you fixed that mixed-use hyphen in the city. That's already a prefix.
Those
so-
are already done. And the other changes that he had, like the city being Garden Ridge, that's struck out because I already changed that. And the figures having errors in them, I changed that as well.
Okay, those are already been changed.
Yes,
The
so
only thing we
those-
need to do is decide whether we're gonna call it zoning district map or official city zoning map. We don't need to repeat all that every time.
Suggestions?
Well, there is another term in here, and I can't find it right now. I'll get to it.
David, your mic.
There is another place where the term zoning district is used, and I came up with a correction for that, because at the one hand, it says zones or districts, as if they're kind of separate things, but it's under the heading of zoning district. So there's more than one correction to make if we do this.
Well, I think we'd be able to be clear about it so that we don't have conflict, and I hear
Right.
that's what you're saying.
Exactly. So the term zoning districts seems to be used multiple times. I'd suggest we stay with the term zoning district and not just zones or
Yes.
districts.
I agree with you.
And that's on page 8 of 215.
My question to the city attorney then is, do we have to vote on that, or we just do it by consensus, or what, we want to change something to this nature?
Yeah, these are, they're necessary for consistency, but they're not material changes, so as long as we get a consensus on, what term we want to use or how we want to address that, that's fine for our purposes tonight.
Thank you.
Well, I think one of the big problems here is we keep talking about official zoning district, and that's, Dave, that's what you're going back to, is when I was reading that, I was going, are we talking about the same apples? Are we talking about apples and oranges, or just apples? And why do we say official? If it's the zoning map, it's the zoning map. What makes it official? It's like,
Yeah, I think it's redundant to have
Yes.
the word official in there.
and again, we dropped the
Well,
word city.
And if I could just jump in here, the reason that there's or denoted as an official zoning map is because for those groups that have, or those cities that have a separate division of the city that is able to produce GIS maps and make its own maps and do its own things, you know, they can be creating maps, you know, in one section or whatever, and somebody could actually go to Development Services and get a GIS map, you know, that would show certain things that they want to know about. However, those things that are denoted on a GIS map or a map that's produced some other way, if it is inconsistent with the, quote, official zoning map, the one that's required to be kept at City Hall in the city secretary's office and all that statutory, then, you know, some folks will come back through and say, and argue, it's like, well, this map I got from your Development Services shows something, and which point you have to point out to them, that's not the official zoning map. This map that is kept here at this location, you know, basically, you know, under guard via the city secretary is the, quote, official zoning map.
Then that should be the name of it, the official
You know,
zoning
so-
map.
So, you know, we can make a reference that there is an official zoning map, but thereafter, throughout,
Be known
the-
as the map, the
right,
zoning
to be
map.
known as the
The
zoning
city
map,
zoning
right.
map.
Yeah.
Well, then that's pretty good. We'd have to do that.
And the definition is in front of you for zoning district map where it says the official certified map. So it does say that's the definition if you would want to use zoning district map. But it also says it may be cited as the zoning map.
Redundant.
Yeah.
Well, we need to decide whether we're gonna call it zoning map or the official zoning map. We just need to decide those
Zoning-
words.
Or the zoning district map.
Waiting for somebody to lead us one way or the other.
Well, since on page 8, since we're on that zoning district established, we refer to zoning districts, I think we ought to leave district in there.
I
So
agree.
zoning district map. David?
Comments on the left?
If that's the case, then we need to change, slide back, please. On the last line, then on 323, the last line needs to be cited as the zoning district map. It needs to be I mean, we're not gonna cite it as zoning map, it's going to be cited as the zoning district map. Is that correct?
So if the commission agrees that they want to use zoning district map, I would just remove that highlighted part from that definition and change all of them in the ordinance to zoning district map. Right.
Okay, I'm good.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we do. I think we do, yes.
Just, I had one question that is just an edit, but it could be an important one, and I didn't see it. I could have missed it on Commissioner Valdez's comments. On page 22, did we remove the reference to Buda? Okay, good. I was like, what? Okay. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, I do see some areas where official zoning district map still on page 215, on 8, page 8 of 215. It does have official zoning. Are we going to leave official in there, or are we going to remove all the words official as we go through that as well? What would be y'all's comments?
Did you catch that? Yes, they took care of that.
Oh, okay.
Suggestions? Huh?
See, it's under the zoning districts. Would you want to also remove the word official on all of those where we refer to the zoning district maps? Or do you think it clarifies it, or do you think it confuses it? I'm not sure what it does there.
Refer back to the attorney, if on this definition here, 323, if it's official there, does that cover it, or?
The key thing is just, you know, so long as that we denote somewhere within the ordinance that there is one official map that is kept by the city secretary, or whatever else we want to call it throughout the ordinance,
Whether we leave it there official, it would be, okay, whether it's there or
Right,
not there
right.
is, okay.
Right,
I
'cause
would
it-
suggest we leave it in there.
Because there are going to be some context within the ordinance for probably official zoning district map is the correct reference.
I don't think it would hurt, I'd just as soon leave it in there as to try to expunge it. Thank you.
Everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so let's leave it in there. Ms. Owen, do you want to continue with things you noted, or you want to pass it on to somebody else? Well, I think we were going to do it by commissioners. I thought we decided to go down the line.
said we go by section, and if anybody had
That's, okay, we'll do it by subsections then, okay. It sounds good.
I did have another question on page 34. In the original discussion on item 2B, we had put the term, that it says accessory dwellings may be occupied by a guest or caregiver. We had added or relative. Are we thinking that guest is the same as relative? I mean, we had changed the wording, but it didn't get changed in the rewrite. I'm just asking the question.
Talking about up in section 2?
It's 2B
Uh-huh.
on page 34.
I think it was caregiver. I think that's what we decided.
A relative may not be a caregiver. I thought we wanted to include the fact of, because this is the accessory dwelling. A guest could be like a short-term thing, possibly, but a relative could be like the mother-in-law thing, which I don't think city council really wanted to prohibit. And a caregiver is an entirely different thing, too. And I'm looking
Yeah.
at our old, the comments on the original, we had put in there relative.
So you're saying something they overlooked when they were talking?
I'm sorry?
You s-
I think it's on a different page,
In the old
in the new one.
33, it's very close in the beginning.
Yeah, but
Are you saying we changed it in one
We-
place and didn't change it in another, or what are you saying?
Yeah, I'm saying that I thought we added it.
Relative.
We added on page 33, 2B, it says guest or care, in other words, the new one says exactly what the old one says, except we added or relative.
I think that should be in there.
I think so, only because I know, I'm
City
pretty
coun-
sure.
city council
City
talked about it,
council
yeah.
had said we don't want to restrict, a mother-in-law, father-in-law, or something like that.
I
Sweet.
agree.
So in 34,
I agree.
2B, that's the one that we've got dropped off, yes.
Right.
There was a lot of discussion about that.
So it would read guest, relative, or caregiver? That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that what you're saying, Ken?
Yes.
Yes.
I also had a question about page 36 in the new rewrite. On C, it too did not get changed, and we had made a comment about the 400 feet. And we said, check on max distance allowed, and then I had on there 1,000 feet. Did anybody else see that?
Talking about 7C?
7C?
Yes, 7C. It has to be located 400 feet from a residential district.
You got it in B, but it doesn't have it in C.
Right, it has 400 feet.
Yeah.
That's from a depository institution, and then it says, or pawn shop, yeah. So
so-
they're different there.
I would, I would agree with 1,000 feet.
Yeah, I think,
think
I
that's-
think
I
we
think
had
we
met,
wanna change
we
it.
had made it 1,000.
I thought we wanted to change both of them, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So they really should be this,
I'm sorry.
they really should be the same. Well, if it's on the chart at 400, it should be changed to 1,000. Same thing, kind of thing for page 37. At the bottom, 10A, it has, no drive-through windows or curb service shall be permitted within 200 feet of a residential zoning district. We also had that questioned at 1,000.
Where are you now, Karen?
Page 37, this is on the new one,
Uh-huh.
DA. I made notes.
D-
That's-
You
that's
said
the only
DA? I have D 1, 2, and 3, but I don't,
10A.
oh, 10A, okay, you said, okay.
Down the bottom.
Uh-huh.
When I'm comparing the notes from our discussion ad nauseum. But yes, then, and I'm comparing it to the new one, that also did not change, so I'm asking the question.
I'd certainly agree with it. "200 feet is the width of people's lots." I mean, it's nothing.
Exactly.
You're right, exactly.
Marissa, I would like to say too that on the next page 38, short-term rental A, I like the way they changed that definition. Short-term rental within a residential district constitutes a commercial use and is prohibited, so that was a good rewrite.
Yes.
And I have on my notes for the previous discussion of 10A, of y'all wanting it to increase it, I have that the city attorney was gonna look into if we can increase that. So I'm not sure if maybe it wasn't changed because we can't.
I'm sorry, can you reference that one again?
It is on,
37?
yes, page 37 of the old one.
No, so
Oh,
new
and the
too.
new one,
New
yes.
yeah.
And it is 10A, the no drive-through. Shall be permitted within 200 feet of a residential zoning district.
So the answer there is that this one, there is some room in there for play as to how far, you want to set up the no drive-through. But the thing that we have to be careful of is that if the distance that we're requiring would basically work as a prohibition against a drive-through. So for those of you that are actually thinking of a specific location in mind, if that 1,000 feet, then puts us perhaps maybe into another district, or puts us into an area where, wherever their location is at 1,000 feet would be maybe, into somebody else's lot, or
Okay, so.
right of way or something like that. So that's the one thing that we need to keep in mind is that if it works as a prohibition,
Okay, so because it's restaurant or cafeteria, bar, or tavern, that's the part of the,
Right, not
the
just any
paperwork-
drive-through.
again, it's talking about drive-through windows or curb service. So even if it's not 1,000 feet, because we might be concerned that it would be somewhat restrictive or, overlap into something, but is 200?
yeah, 200 is pretty small.
It is. And I could just see if it's butting up against, on 2252, a residential area, That's gonna become
I
an
mean, it
issue.
begs the question, do we have to allow drive-throughs? I mean, could we say we don't want any drive-throughs? Is that legal? I'm not saying we shouldn't have them, I'm just asking the question.
Or maybe in this area. I don't know.
But we have drive-throughs set up where they stay inside of a parking lot. It
Well,
doesn't
the
come
bank
in.
has a
You're-
drive-through,
it's a
for
bank.
Right,
example.
yeah, I was gonna say.
This is
But-
specifically restaurant,
Right.
cafeteria, bar, tavern.
Right,
You know, I didn't research to see if it could be prohibited in their entirety.
okay, well,
What I was looking for was max distance, if the city could, you know, set up a max distance.
Yeah. I recall having the discussion around drive-throughs, as long as they don't go out to to 2252, for example, they stay with, the drive-through goes in and stays in the parking lot.
like
It
the
was
bank.
acceptable, so that typically would not be probably within 1,000 feet.
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
well, again, even if
the way-
we,
Well,
even if we
the
set
bank
aside
is-
the 1,000 feet, which we had
Yeah.
previously
Yeah.
mentioned, is 200.
Yeah, that's pretty small.
That's like the, with
I mean, the bank is within, I don't know how far, but it's not 1,000 feet to the nearest residence. The
Right.
residence essentially
Right there,
right
yeah.
behind it.
This is commercial district, we're not talking.
We're not talking office professional either, or the
No,
bank.
I'm just talking reality right now. We do have a drive-through within, certainly within 1,000 feet of a residence right now.
So it's not a.
It's not a restaurant,
It's not a
cafeteria,
restaurant.
bar, or
Right,
tavern.
Right.
So it's,
1,000 seems pretty extreme, but 200 seems a little less.
On the other
Maybe
side.
500, something, 500 or 600
Well-
feet would be
It-
more,
it-
that way they could put left or right, put the building to the one side or the other, to put the drive on the other side of the building, you know, flip it to the left or right, but I personally think 1,000 is a little extreme.
So what we should probably do is have the question posed to city council and saying, we think 200's
Yeah.
Well,
kind of, not enough too,
Well,
too
we've-
restrictive.
We already have 1,000 for non-depository financial institutions.
Right.
Payday lending, so I don't know how we can say it's too extreme for a bar and not for something else.
Well, you're looking at a commercial district, building, so.
But it may abut to a residential.
Well, no, here's the thing, the commercial side, light retail was going to be on the opposite side of 2252,
right. That's
where there is no residential behind
what-
it.
So I don't think it's an issue, yeah.
But
So
if
it's
you're
still an
Across
extreme.
the street from, what is it? I forget the name of the subdivision there, but empties out into 2252, is it Arrowwood?
That's on the other side, we're talking light retail,
I understand.
other side.
Yeah, other side, but that's within 1,000 feet, certainly.
I think we shelved 1,000 feet. I think we're just asking the question, is 200 too not restrictive enough, or should we make it, or let city council chew on this and just say that,
Well, you can't use the 1,000 feet to bar them, and, you know.
said that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, you can't use that, so that's pretty much out of the picture, the 1,000 feet, but maybe something along in the 500 to 600 foot range would be a little bit more, space between them, and that's kind of what we're looking for, development-wise.
Yeah.
If 1,000 feet is too much for a tavern, why isn't it too much for the payday lending and pawn shop?
Personally, I have no problem with drive-throughs. That's why I haven't joined the discussion.
Maybe all of
But I
it's
do
too much.
think that the commission has a problem with them, so the commission has a problem with drive-throughs. We got 1,000 on the table, we got 200 on the table. Why don't, okay, but in our minds, we're thinking somewhere in between is what we want. Why don't we throw out a number there? I don't think we should take it to city council as blank and let them decide. I think we have to make a decision
I agree.
and go forward with a decision to city council. That's what I'm saying. So if it's 500, 600, or whatever, I think we need to say that and take that to city council. If they don't like it, they'll have to research it and come back to us and say, no, that's too restrictive, or no, that's too lenient.
And I think we ought to take into consideration 7B and 7C
Right,
as
that's
well.
what I mean.
And all of it
we
together.
already-
And I
exactly.
personally think that 1,000's not too much. I'd like to see something between 500 and 600, and that's what I'd comment.
Other commissioners? I told you how I felt about it. So I'm looking for
I'm
input
look-
from the other
Well, I'm looking at the
commissioners.
map, you know, and I don't think we're gonna be in a situation where there's gonna be anything close to 1,000 feet anyway.
Okay,
And that's gonna be possible.
okay,
So I don't know if it's an issue at all.
okay.
I agree with you, Dr. Jim, you know, just based, what I'm seeing. So,
So there's no point in having no distance in there, or what
no,
we're
I think
saying?
we'll have to leave it in there, but,
Oh, 1,000, I thought the 1,000 feet was off the table, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
so we don't want
For the
1,000
fifth
there.
time, it's off the table.
Yeah, it's off the table. So what I'm asking for, what is the commission, do we want to go forward with? 500, 600, 700, what is it?
And this is strictly residential zoning district, okay? That's what it's talking about.
Yeah.
It's not just,
I'll make a decision, I'll say 500. Anybody have a problem with 500? On my left?
No.
All right, okay, we'll make it 500.
and that changes 7, B, and C, and 10. Okay, well, they're not the same anyway. This other one does say, already references 1,000 feet. The other C, 7C references 4, and we said, well, why isn't it the same as the other? And then this one references 2. Is there a need to be, you know, because they're different, districts. But they're also talking about residential district or, school, church, or public or private park as measured. So,
Again, I said
I
500.
agree with your suggestion.
Let's put 500 in there. Maybe we can bring it to attention of city council when we get there and say, we talked about this at length, and what do you guys think? But I don't want to give them no number at all. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's make it 500 in all the places and go from there. In the interest of moving on more than anything else.
Marissa, page 40. Did we catch the edit there? Double I,
Spelling,
the he should be the, okay, got it.
page 40. See, Justin? I'm trying to get my what you call it, some question. I'm trying to go by what I had written them down. On page 78. I'm jumping way ahead. Don't let that be a guide that we're moving up to 78.
Well, shouldn't we,
On page 78, I think I had written down, there's a redundancy in parts 2 and 3 of the voluntary agreement. That's what I had written down. Let's see what it says. Page 78
the new one?
of the new one is redundant. Voluntary nature and agreement, K, so it starts at K on page 78 on the bottom.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Number 2 and number
Right,
3
right.
are exactly the same.
got it.
Then on
That you looked at.
Then on page 52, I thought we had some discussion about adding a word in there, because the way things are, let me find it. We had on B3, connection of the irrigation system to the water supply must be done by a licensed irrigator, and the backflow device inspected by licensed backflow tester. And I thought we added yearly in there, 'cause that's what we have in the city. We do it yearly. I don't see that in there. Page 52, B3. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Did we not discuss putting it in yearly, the word yearly in there, because that's what we do already?
Well,
Yes.
Okay, so we need to put yearly in there.
Is that,
well,
Is it
I
in the
would,
water?
Go
I
ahead.
would
Help me-
say,
help me, Waterman.
if we say that it's in accordance with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and leave it at that, it covers it, because whatever they say goes. If they want to change it to 6 months, they will, or 10 years, or whatever, and we don't have to worry about changing a time period. We're just going to go in accordance with what they say, and it's already in there.
I stand corrected then, we don't need to add the word yearly. On page 58, I had questions going through, about, fee in lieu, down on the bottom of the page, number 6, and the last sentence, read the last sentence to you. If the parking study determines that the current amount of parking is insufficient, the proposed use must provide the additional parking or contribute a fee in lieu, excuse me. And I can't remember I can't remember if we had a discussion about that or not, but I didn't know what the fee in lieu it was, or where to reference the fee in lieu. Does we go back to the fee schedule, or where does a person go to when a person is confronted with a dispute about the parking they have on their property? Did we talk about it at all?
Shared parking modifications. This is talking off-street.
And so my question was, yeah, the fee in lieu, who gets it, who pays it, where does it go, what schedule do we use, or whatever. Did we discuss it before, or did I miss, did we
Is
miss
that part of
it?
the impact committee or that Valley committee?
I didn't either when I went.
I don't have any notes either on that.
I will admit, it took me the 4th or 5th reading to catch it, but when I looked at it, I said, what is that? So somewhere down the line, we have to talk with
Yeah.
Yeah.
Freeze Nichols about the
Fee
fee
in
in
lieu
lieu,
in
or
accordance
Nancy.
with what?
Yeah. I'll talk to Nancy about the fee in lieu.
And I'm just going to jump in here. So normally, when we have a development type of ordinance, there are some things where the city can set an actual standard and a fee in lieu of gets applied towards. So for instance, if we're talking about park space
Yes.
and parking spaces, the city can go through and establish via ordinance, it has to be established via separate ordinance, that the city will accept X number of dollars for, in exchange for not putting in, let's say, the required parking space or park space within a planned unit development or something along those lines. And so those fees then get put into a pre-established fund, and in this case, if we're talking about parks, it goes into a designated parks fund, and then the city uses those funds with which to work parks improvement only. So fees in lieu generally work that way, and so they will also set up for on-site or off-site detention. If you don't want on-site detention, that's fine, you can pay that fee in lieu, and that goes into the city's, drainage utility fund, and then it goes and is applied towards whatever improvements the city makes throughout the city for drainage retention. So that's generally what the fees in lieu are used and how they're used, so I'm not real sure where the intent is, what Mr. Sparks was going with this, so that's kind of a question we probably need to flag that and put to him, saying, where are we going with this?
Yeah. I understood the concept, I was just wondering, in Garden Ridge, who collects the money and where does it go? That's my question.
The city has not, that I know of, established any program like that.
Okay. So it's something we have to look forward.
So we're gonna ask about that and put a definition in if that's the case?
I guess so. And I've jumped everybody ahead to 59. I know there's some stuff in between that. Karen, you acted, you read.
where are you? I was gonna jump a little bit ahead too, so it's okay.
Over on page 59, I had problems with the way it's worded. We had a 59, let's go to pedestrian circulation down at the bottom. B, and it said the city may require the property owner to improve the pedestrian path. And I had several other places where you use the way, you use the word may. And I think we got in trouble with that on one of our variances here, was it a variance or was it a complaint from the Northeast Bible Church where the residents behind, he said may, and he left it.
No, the wording was, that the city, recommended, they did not require,
And so
and so the
I'm having
developer
trouble.
didn't.
Yeah, so I'm having trouble with the may
Yeah.
in these sentences there. So I don't know how everybody else felt about it.
If you want to make it mandatory, we'll change it to shall. If you leave it may, it seems to be up to the discretion, so.
There were several other places, I didn't write them all down. I think it should be a shall, simply because of our experience in the past.
As a, think about it, you write them as a shall, ordinances are
Right.
shalls.
And I really feel the same way, Kit.
Let's say, change all mays to shall.
So noted.
Marissa,
I know,
did
I know,
you hear
she
that,
does,
Marissa?
I know, she's
Okay,
listening,
okay.
okay. Got it.
And Karen, I cut you off. You said you had some that were a little bit ahead.
Well, I'll wait to see if you had any more.
Nothing that comes to mind right quickly. I wrote my next suggestions down as more questions and paragraphs, and they want. I have to go back and look at the paragraph to see what the question was I had about it. So if you have something, please.
Anyone else? Have anything?
Yeah, I guess when it's my turn, or
Oh,
however
we're not
we're
doing
going.
No, we never turn.
Just
Oh.
jump in there.
Go by pages.
Yeah, do
Oh.
the pages, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna go way back.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, please.
I thought we were taking turns. I had no idea. All right. So, and just as a general question, I ask that for our city attorney over there, I assume, I hate to assume anything, but on pages 1 and 2 and 3 and things like that, there's a lot of legalese that I know I'm not competent to determine if we're in compliance with all those laws and references. I trust that you're looking at that and making sure we are.
So yes, sir, those first few pages have already been reviewed, and we're clear on those, so.
Okay.
There are a couple of sections of some of the proposed changes that Friesen Nichols made to try to assist with the housing bill,
Yeah, we're
that we probably gonna have to have
That
some
was-
discussion
that
on.
was next.
Okay, so I just have a question for page 5. Maybe something just needs to be clear at the bottom. It talks about meetings under D, and the chairperson shall vote in the event of a tie. And it talks about 75% of members in attendance shall be necessary to reverse any order. So when you have the initial vote, for example, our commission, the chair would not vote if all commissioners were, or, well, if we have a quorum. The chair just doesn't, only votes in the case of a tie.
Right.
Correct?
That's correct.
Okay, should we add the chairperson shall only vote in the event of a tie? Because it's not clear otherwise. Because it changes the dynamic if you start doing the math based on who's here and who's not.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. So it's the basic question, does the chair vote? And just to clarify, the chair only votes in the event of a tie.
Right, and this statement comes out as a statement in the first line, it only votes in a tie. So you're saying that
It says shall vote, not only vote.
Yeah.
it should be only
The
votes.
shall only vote is, I think we have to put the word only in there,
We can do that. Yeah.
okay? I assume everyone agrees, okay? Next, okay, we get into these, okay, we already talked about zoning districts, and let's see. Okay, so on page 10, another question really, under C, changes or amendments reflected on the map. It's talking about the official zoning map again. It says, shall be incorporated into the zoning district map file promptly after the amendment has been approved by the city council. Well, what does promptly mean? Is that 10 days, 30 days, 100 days?
Okay. So promptly is one of those terms that doesn't have a specific statutory,
Right. That's why I'm questioning it. Why should we have, would it be better to say within 30 days or something like that?
Or according to,
Or whatever. However we want to define promptly as, if we think it's 45 days or 10 days or 3 days, I don't know, but promptly leaves a lot to your imagination and interpretation. So-
My question would be to the attorney, have other jurisdictions or other cities gotten in trouble using that?
actually, no, I think that might actually come directly from the statute promptly. So the city can define that, but if we're going to define what promptly is, then we're going to have to define it to the short side. And the reason why is that case law promptly is determined on a case-by-case basis. So in some case, having filed that within 90 days was promptly, having filed it within a year was promptly. It just depends on whatever the actual case is. So if we want to define that, you're certainly more than welcome to as a policy decision. But
Is it to the benefit of the city to define it or not, do you think?
I don't know
I
that,
don't want to put us on a box, but on the other hand, I don't want to open the
Right.
city up to, like, you guys aren't doing your job or something like that.
right, and I think that's the con to actually establishing a set time limit, because if the city were to get into, into a legal scenario, and, it was pointed out that the city's, legal requirements are that, that gets filed promptly within 10 days, and come to find out, Marissa is the one that caught the flu, and for whatever reason, whoever's filling in didn't catch up with all of that, and she comes back, 30 days later, we got it taken care of, but in 30 days, a very important decision was made, boom, now the city has an issue.
Okay, so we're better off just leaving it where
I
it
think
is.
we're probably better off just leaving it as
Okay.
is.
and if I could follow up to that, I have on number 3 there, I guess it probably follows up with the same comment, use all reasonable means. Is that pretty much follow up to that same? Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, the next question I had is on page 12, and it's under A, intent. And again, it's a similar type of question. Second last sentence in paragraph A there, it says, should not be detrimental to urban land uses. I don't know what that means. Who determines what detrimental is? It just seems to be,
Right.
Uh,
So the big case that comes to mind on this one is, it's, and I'm trying to remember what city, but long story short, there was a city that had its zoning set up, and there was a feedlot that was there. It had been there, it'd been there forever and a day. And those uses, you know, when that feedlot was established, were valid uses under the zoning. Fast forward, you know, 50 years, the feedlot's still there. Del Webb comes and builds its community right there next to it. There's a big fight because they're saying that those uses and the ag uses are detrimental to this property because of, you know, smell and
Right.
sound and this, that, and the other.
It's like building by the airport.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so,
So there again, and just with zoning, you know, any case that goes forward, you know, in a lawsuit for zoning, it is generally 99.5% fact specific. So it's always going to be the facts of the case, you know, that where the outcome comes out. Most of the time, the actual ordinance as written is not off, it is just an interpretation of the actual facts. So, you know, here, ag uses there shouldn't be detrimental to urban land use. Well, all right, if we've got an ag farmer that it has fertilizers and certain chemicals that, you know, must be stored in a certain way, you got to contain them in a certain way, and you want to ensure that there's no runoff where at all possible, so that it doesn't run off, you know, downstream to, you know, totally residential areas, and now it's polluted that stream. So those are the kinds of things that they're looking at as far as uses that are not, or ag uses that are consistent and not detrimental to neighboring zones.
so just leave it the way it is?
Yeah, because there's a lot of things in here that it is probably better and to the city's benefit to leave them a little bit more open than trying to button them up too tight.
Okay, thank you. All right, going along here. I think the next questions I have to do with the table that lists all the different types of businesses and things like that. So, and my general question, and my apologies, because I know I missed a couple of meetings, but there seems to be a lot of different types of entities listed here, and I'll just start on page 25. For example, dwelling multifamily loft apartment is permitted within the community mixed-use district. So have we made the decision, and my apologies if we did and I missed it, that we are going to allow multifamily unit loft-type apartments in the city? I don't recall that, but according to this, they're permitted. Silence.
I remember us, we were wanting to take out a lot of these things, and there's even one that says, well, then, you know, you go to the.
Well, there's several more, but I'm
Right.
starting with that one.
Right, okay, but I remember our discussion was that we should leave them in, but put in there where they might be permitted, and if it's
Well, that's what,
permitted by whatever, or by.
well, this is saying, for example, it's permitted in the community mixed-use area.
And where is that? That-
Well,
Do we have one?
I mean, well, whatever. This is saying it's permitted. So if you just start with that, when did we ever decide they're permitted? Because they're not permitted now in our existing ordinance, so I don't
Well,
recall.
apartment, period.
Exactly. So this, if it stands, we allowed apartments as this stands right now, if this is adopted.
I think.
The last discussion, I apologize,
Go
Dr.
ahead.
Miller.
No, you go ahead first, please.
The last discussion that I remember on this is that the commission had begun exploring perhaps in, I think because we only have one area that I think is going to be technically allowed for like a planned use development or something like that, that it could potentially go in there, but my recollection is that there was no definitive decision from the commission. Y'all had started exploring the thought process
Right.
that maybe we would allow it there if anywheres.
Right.
Um,
And I recall that too.
But,
This has made a change,
right,
okay?
but as far as I know, no decision was made.
Right.
Well, the old, did you compare it to the old?
Yeah, it's the same.
It's exactly the same.
Right.
So I think that's what happened, is we said we can't restrict it totally, so let's.
Why can't we
But I think-
restrict totally? We
because-
can.
But I think what we're gonna do is not have any neighborhood mixed-use districts or community mixed-use districts on the map. That's how we're gonna control
See,
it.
that was my
Right.
point.
So it's not-
Where is that? It's not there.
Right.
So it's not in the map.
So
It's
then
not gonna
why
be in the
don't,
map.
so why don't we just put an X in that box?
Well, I think there was an attempt to keep it in the records, but we don't show it on the map, so.
We don't have, yeah,
We
Well,
don't
then-
have it.
we don't have it, so it doesn't exist.
Right,
Well,
because I
then
think they said, don't start.
It
you know,
exists
taking all
right
this
here.
off.
We were starting to take stuff off. We were striking through things, and it was collapsing the map. And we decided not to
Okay.
collapse the
And it
map.
wasn't we decided, I think we were, given the,
Directions. to
direction,
leave it
suggestion.
alone,
Yeah.
And just, our official map is the map
Right.
we use,
And,
not the chart.
Well, it's in the chart, and if anything, it's gonna add a lot of confusion because we have choices here. We
But
could
the
put in,
choice
We
we,
don't have
The
those
chart's not the
districts.
choice. The map is the choice. The
I
map is the
remember
official
Nancy
map.
saying,
I do remember that.
yes, saying it's
so
better
we're
to-
saying it's permitted in something that doesn't exist.
Exactly, that's what I said. Where is that?
What the,
District.
why would we say something like that
You
even?
were not here at those meetings, and we went through hours of that conversation.
Okay, I'm glad I wasn't here then.
Well,
Cynthia, this was one time when you were not here.
Yeah.
okay, because I was gonna say, I don't remember that, but.
Yeah, you were not here, you were,
We were not here, the other gentleman was there.
yeah, that's why
Oh,
I
okay, okay.
Well, they're clearly, if you look at the chart and just taking it at face value, what this says, it's clearly not allowed in every different type of entity, like ag area and residential district, but it is allowed here. So to be consistent, if we don't want them, and maybe maybe somebody does want them, why don't we just put an X in the box?
Do with the law that we couldn't say that we couldn't have it, but if we, there was something about the law, I remember
Well,
that.
there's our law right there.
Well, the other gentleman that was here guided us through this, and this is what we came up with, but now that we see it in black and white, it might be better to revisit the whole paper and look at it again, because we had a lot of discussion and a lot of
Right.
markup.
Well, I know we had a lot of discussion, that's why and
There were a
again,
whole bunch of other-
my apologies if it was a meeting I wasn't here, but I don't think we ever made a decision that we wanted it, so, and there's multiple places like that.
This looks a lot different than this one we all saw.
For example, look on page 28, fourth one up from the bottom, and I'm like, oh, heavens. Yeah,
Yes,
and-
exactly.
Yeah, so, but it's, again,
It says you have a special use permit, you can have a hotel.
yes.
And I
and
thought we
then
already
also-
crossed that bridge.
Right, community mixed use, neighborhood mixed
Right.
use. Where does that say that?
I think we could have a whole meeting on this, probably by
Yeah,
Right.
we, believe me, we went through this. We
Right,
wanted to
well, I know, we
strike,
talked
strike.
about these things many times, and it just comes down to a fundamental decision, do we want them or not?
You know, maybe we ought to just take these pages and go through and get our other edits and let those start, and then review these.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. That's
these
exactly
pages.
where I was going to suggest,
Okay.
that we take that chart and make it almost a separate meeting or a separate section that we talk about, because otherwise we'd be here the rest of the night.
This chart
with
is
just the
almost
chart.
the whole
Well,
ordinance, if you get right down.
and my experience has been, is that if you have something listed in a chart within an ordinance, and this is just all anecdotal, there's no law on this one, but my experience has been, if you have something in a chart that looks like it's permissive, it is probably better for us to exit.
Instead of saying it's allowed.
Right, instead of saying it loud and then saying, but King,
Believe me, we went round and round on this.
right, right, and that is just, like I say, more from experience than an actual review of any case law or anything, it's just that,
Yeah, well,
Big
I'm-
thank
You know, and it may
that's
be-
exactly my point. If you're saying it's allowed, it's up to a lot of interpretation And to try to defend it, well, it's not on the map, well.
Right.
No, no,
And it
it's
might
change
be
the
just
map.
as,
that district.
right, right. And it might be just as simple as, you know, identifying those things, and then rather than trying to collapse the map or the chart or kind of messing with that chart any, you know, we can just ask, you know, say, hey, black out this box, this box, this box, so that it just doesn't show up. A black box is perfectly fine.
Okay, so again, well, we have all these S's and P's under, the community commercial and then, community mid, I mean, we don't have those. Why are those districts there?
Well, they
Shouldn't,
in my mind, they shouldn't be
this
there.
chart match?
They should match our zoning map,
It
and
should.
our official zoning map.
Yes,
Yeah,
It
yeah,
makes me-
that'd be a nice idea.
It makes me wonder what happened to all those edits that we did, because we spent considerable time
That's a
about
question I've
blocking
been asking.
those.
Yes.
And I thought we had blocked those out.
Yes.
It's been about 3 months ago that
We've-
we went through that and
we've-
blocked those out.
We
I-
put in lots of edits that seem to.
But they were completely blocked
knows what.
out. So now they come back and they're all here, so.
Yeah, exactly my point.
Again, my suggestion
Yes.
is to set the chart
I'll
to
have
the
to dig out all my
side
stuff on that.
and make that a separate discussion at one of our meetings. Otherwise, we'll be here all night long
Okay.
doing one by one. So we
Before
can go
leave
back
it, Can I
home.
ask one more question
Go
of
ahead,
the attorney?
please.
Since we
Go ahead,
spent
sir.
so much time on this one particular thing,
Mm-hmm.
in that chart, when we eventually get it to be correct, there was nothing I could see in there in all the lists of different types of businesses that would be considered a sexually oriented business, which we belabored, as you well know, a long time, and we decided we had to have a zone to accommodate those, but there's nothing in that chart that indicates that.
No, we had to have a zone where they were allowed.
Yes, and
we said-
it's on the map, but it's not in the chart. And what I'm saying is, they should complement one another.
right, I see, yeah.
We actually said move down the road.
Yeah, we
Not
beat
now.
that
We
dead
said,
horse.
let us point you towards
Yeah,
that way.
so, anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Is everybody in agreement to leave the chart discussion to
Yeah.
another meeting in itself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other than that,
You're
I'm
through?
done.
So then, if we are, if no one has anything, there's another elephant in the room.
I got some other ones I wanted to talk about.
Before,
Yeah, go ahead.
Up to what page?
Oh, I'm to the whole thing.
Oh, no, I wasn't,
Yeah.
I was saying, the big elephant in the room and what,
Go ahead.
Cynthia alluded to is, Friesen Nichols in good faith tried to give us a point system for, that Nancy had kind of discussed a little bit, saying, well, maybe we could do this after that House bill passes. But the more you look at it, and it goes into, let's see, the building and all this stuff, it almost appears that we say we have a standard, and yet you're doing all these things, and with this level of the building or this level, then you get these extra things, and it could come down to someone saying, well, then you really don't have a standard, okay, because if you can do these other things. And I do know that after some discussion, this bill has only been in place for 5 months. And I know that there are some council people, should I say it? The mayor is very concerned about the fact that this is in here, because we don't want to be in the pot right now as the guinea pigs, okay? And, because there's a lot of potential for somebody to turn around and say, nope, you know, we're gonna try and sue you because then you really don't have a standard. Am I getting this right? Cynthia?
So I think, so yes, I think you've articulated, you know, one of the issues with, you know, the potential point system, the way that it's currently set up. So I know that initially, you know, when House Bill 3167 passed, not 3167, it's the other 24,
2439.
we weren't real sure, you know, is there anything, you know, is there a way to incentivize a builder or a developer to stick with, for lack of a better term, what is the program for the city of Garden Ridge? There's a certain aesthetic here. The city is primarily built out. There are certain design standards that have been in place, you know, for many, many years, and it's been successful. You know, and then along comes the change in the building materials, and so we weren't real sure how to address that. And one of the things that we thought about is that, is there a way to be able to set up some sort of incentive plan that allows builders, you know, some give and take to be able to figure out how to best get them to make sure that whatever they do come in and develop meets with, you know, the ongoing aesthetic here within the city. And so we had toyed with the idea of a point system, you know, incentives, so that, you know, if you met condition X, well, then you got A, or if you met condition, you know, Z, then you got B, so that you could have, you know, perhaps more impervious cover, or in exchange for that, you could have, you know, some additional height, you know, building up. And so I think Karen or Commissioner Diaz mentioned a couple of keywords here. I think Freeze and Nichols in good faith put forth their thoughts on how that could work. But in reviewing them, and this is a discussion I had with Nancy last week in preparation for the meeting, that we thought we would be able to cover here today, notwithstanding illness. I'm not so convinced that what we have here is going to serve the city's needs and isn't going to make us the test case.
Glad to hear that.
I agree.
Thank you.
So I believe that voluntary agreements are well within the realm of possibility, so that if, you know, if a developer came in, you know, city administrator sits down and visits with them, and they're like, hey, we can work out an agreement, and we agree to these 5 things. It's just this one thing we're going to hold steady on, and you can't make me because, you know, of the new legislation. Then we would be able to get that into an agreement form and get it compliance that way. So I think Freeze and Nichols was definitely on track with that. So any agreement, you know, that's of a voluntary nature, you know, that developer says, you know, well, I didn't see it that way. Yes, that's an agreement. You know, that's something we can agree to. We can certainly do it that way. I know that scoring systems, you know, are in place and have been in place, you know, for you know, development review for many, many years. I just don't know that we can necessarily tie that scoring system to a preferred building material, because in essence what we're trying to do is get around the legislation that says.
So okay, so knowing that, do we tell Freeze and Nichols, you know, we are not comfortable with starting on page 72, I believe, because this is single-family design, and then there's some that's non-residential and all of it, but page 72 through 75, the scoring aspect. Are looking at this, and in your knowledge previously, are there some things, well, this one says building coverage, so I don't know if that's the actual, you know, footprint of the building, or if that's the way the building is built. I know a big one is impervious cover, that we probably should say, no, we need to take that off and deal with it here we go, in the other chart that has the list of.
Page 45.
45, thank you. Back, 40. It has the percentages allowable for like impervious cover, and look at that and go with that kind of thing instead of putting it in this point system aspect.
So what I can tell you is, you know, I can give y'all some things to kind of ponder. So the one way that we absolutely know that we'll be compliant with the new legislation is just to remove this. You know, absent, you know, an agreement on the part of developer, you know, we can just remove that and say, you know, developer, as long as you get it and uses the requisite building materials in the last 3 cycles of the codes, we know definitively that we meet the requirement and the intent of the law. And, you know, then we get to the other side here, which I think this might be almost to the polar opposite of that, you know, where we say, you know, you'll gain our favor and you'll gain much, much more points if you meet our definition of what we say is a building 1, a building 2, or a building 3 material. So that we're saying, you know, and what it smacks of is basically we're saying, listen, if you want to gain our approval, then you need to use the very best materials that are out there, which I think could readily be seen by a court as trying to get around the legislative intent and the actual letter of the law. So,
So we need to ask them to strike these pages.
so, you know, if we could just get a little bit of direction or a feel here for where we think Garden Ridge's threshold is, you know, then I'm happy to visit with Chance on this, on the legal part of it. This is why I think, you know, it's a good first shot, but I don't know that it's going to do anything but, you know, create some issues.
I saw it as one of the options. Being a contrarian, I saw it as one of the options available to us. I'd like to know if there are any other options to handle it and not be perceived as being trying to get around it, okay? And I think I made some assumptions to say that. I made some assumptions about it, is that I was always taught if you hire an expert to give you advice, you should probably follow the advice. I assumed, and this is a bad word, I assumed that Freeze Nichols has other clients, and he's run this solution past some other clients. And I don't know if it's one other client, 2 other clients, 100 other clients, what? And if everybody else was on board with it and says, we think it'll work, then I thought Garden Ridge should be part of that. What I'm hearing from my co-commissioners is that, no, we really don't want to be part of it. What I don't want to do is do nothing. That's my main thing. I don't want to do nothing. That's my own opinion. So my question to Chance was going to be, okay, how much did you research this? Is anybody else doing this? How far along have they gotten with it if they are doing it? And if the developers, you know, rose up en masse to say, no, we're not going to do this or whatever, and kind of use that as a guideline for which way Garden Ridge should go. And if we see there's going to be a big push, I mean, we're 5 months out. Maybe there is nobody, maybe nobody else has done it already. And I don't want to be the guinea pig either, but I don't want to do nothing. I want to try to do something. We've been sitting around on this for a year and a half, at least here in Garden Ridge, trying to get this ordinance squared away. And then we got close to the edge, and we had to pull back. So I think what I wanted to do was do exactly what you suggested, not confront Chance, but ask Chance, okay, what's the background for this chart thing? Have you run it past your attorneys? And then in turn marry that up with what our attorney's telling us as the experts, and use that as a guide to whether or not we take it forward to city council. Again, we don't make the final decision. We say, this is one of the options that he gave us. It's been used here, and here. It hasn't been challenged, or it has been challenged. We looked at some of the other ones. We still are not real excited about it, but this is the one to give you something to look at. This is what we want to bring to you, and then say what the city council wants to say. They're elected officials. They have to make that decision. But I don't think we should not bring it forward to them as one of the options, if it is one of the options. If it's the only option, then we can say, okay, here's what we got. We're not real excited about it, you know?
And so to that end, I can answer a couple of, or speak directly to a couple of things you mentioned. So I know that as of last week, to our knowledge, there has been no challenges to the law, no challenges to anybody who's rewritten, you know, or trying to amend their ordinance on that. That it just, as far as we know, no lawsuit has happened yet. And that's just because it's still pretty fresh and everybody's still being pretty tentative about, you know, and even builders are being pretty tentative about what they're doing and how far they're pushing with, you know, with the new law. Number two, generally speaking, this type of fight will normally go to the bigger cities first, or to a collective group of smaller entities that will go in together to say, all right, we'll take this fight on, but we're going to do it as a group. And there again, to my knowledge, there's no challenge, you know, on that going. And the idea there is that, you know, if, you know, San Antonio decides to take that fight on, well, they can absorb that cost much more readily than smaller entities. So that's normally how that gets challenged. We have been, the collective, we at DNRB, DNZ, we have been, you know, putting some thought processes into that because, you know, as y'all know, we hire a wide range of clients, different cities, you know, everything kind of in between. And what we feel is potentially a good way for the city to be able to address its incentives would not necessarily be to set it up the way we've got it set up here. Although, like I said, I think there probably are some provisions in there that could certainly would survive, you know, a fight. And for instance, you know, a voluntary agreement, you know, I think that certainly is, you know, well in the realm of possibilities. You know, maybe landscaping issues, because generally speaking, landscaping issues are not the fight. Maybe some, I'm going to refer to them as building aesthetics, so that, you know, some, you know, windows and window size, or decorative features, that sort of thing, you know, could be some areas of play. But I think the areas where we're actually touching on building materials and saying you get, you know, more points for this type of material, I think that could be real problematic. And so one of the things that we have thought about, a way to incentivize builders is through an entirely different program, so that it is not attached to the zoning ordinance itself, and it's referred to, you know, as a Chapter 380 agreement. And a Chapter 380 agreement is a tool in the local government code that is available to every city. You set up a program, you know, and you're trying to push certain developments and certain economic incentives and that sort of thing, you know, and you work out basically any myriad of deal related to development. Chapter 380, the directive in it and how you apply it is probably about a half a page to 3/4 page in the local government code. And so there is a lot of room in there, and it may be a tool that the city may need to consider, since in reality, this is, you know, those couple of areas that are ripe for development would be the first time the city is actually facing development of this, you know, of the type, you know, envisioned within the city. So that it may be that you know, we pitch that to council instead, saying, hey, we feel that there are room to get the type of development that Garden Ridge wants to see and would like to see, but we need to do it through a different mechanism.
Well, one thing we need to do is, we talked about, you know, getting with the HOAs, because HOAs have different power to control the material content. Get with the HOA presidents, boards, and architecture review committees as a way to be sure that they have their things in place, to be sure that, you know, that take care of what we intended for the HOAs. It's outside the HOAs that we don't have, we
Which is the
need to deal
commercial
with.
development, which is
Yeah,
what
the
we're
commercial
gonna
development,
mostly
yeah.
be looking at.
Yeah.
A lot of this has to do with how the contractors view building in Garden Ridge versus building in Hollywood Park versus building in, you know, Houston or Dallas. And contractors have a lot of like theory or how they want to project their image. And, you know, just like a Jack in the Box in one town is not the same Jack in the Box. And if they want to build in Garden Ridge, they're gonna want to make a profit. I'm using Jack in the Box, it could be anything, but, you know, it's just the business that came to mind. But a lot of developers wanna make profit and they wanna be in the community. So if they wanna be within the community, that the community wants them to be there, they will go for these, local agreements, and perhaps that's probably the best way to go. They'll sign an agreement. They'll say, I wanna be part of your community, and, you know, if we tell them we would like it to look like this, you know, if it's not too much and they think we'll support them if it looks like that, you know, there's sometimes they'll jump in there and sign those local agreements and do what we want. So I would tend to be looking for this local agreement sign as a more viable option instead of this point system that somebody has to run, keep, tally, keep track of. That just seems like it's a massive accounting system and not something that's a real viable long-term, so.
Where I stood, I couldn't find how you get the points. It's like, where's that chart?
How do you use them? How you get them, but how you use them?
Yeah,
Yeah.
how do you get?
It's your local credit card.
How many more do you get?
Yeah.
We're gonna keep it on a credit card.
How do you get to the 60? You know, but,
I think it's a counting nightmare, and
Yeah.
I'd like to see this local agreement and review that 380 and see what that does. I think that sounds much bit more beneficial to our use.
I agree, because it's very confusing.
Again, it may be incomplete. If Friesen Nichols has other clients and has two or 300 other clients, they may have worked this stuff out. And we don't know. I want to ask Chance the question.
She is, that's what she was going to, I think, visit with Chance, right?
Yes, I'm happy to visit with Chance to see, you know, where,
The background.
right,
What's
the background of
yeah.
how they got there.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, that-
I think we're all saying the same thing, just in a different way.
Yeah.
I wasn't real excited about it, but I said, it's better than nothing, you know? And that's the way I looked at it. And then when I heard some of the things you guys have said and some people from other citizens, I said, I didn't think of it that way. And certainly, city council is tasked with keeping the city out of trouble and getting them into something, whereas we don't have that same ceiling at this level. Okay, we can take it so far, and then they have to bring us back in line if we get too far out of line. But I think before I would even bring it to them, I would like to know, okay, Chance, where did this come from, and what is the background for this before I take it to city council? I don't want to look like a fool in city council, or if they ask some questions, I want to be able to say, this is where it came from, this is the background. That's not sufficient for them. I understand, we have to go back to the drawing board. The way I look at it is, if it has to go back to the drawing board, they are more in tune to the cost to go back to the board, because there's gonna be more billable hours and stuff like that, whereas we don't have that constraint right now. We say, hey, it goes to go back, and they're gonna say, wait a minute, Jim, we can't go back too many more times, because we're running out of money to go back, okay?
Well, we don't
And-
have the money just to go back. We certainly don't have the money to be a test case in a lawsuit.
I would agree with you. I would
Well,
agree with
and
you.
Commissioner, or Chairman Miller, I think you said it correctly, it's, Friesen Nichols started with nothing, because there was nothing to start with. They're just trying to put together, you know, based on their knowledge, what they've seen works, what they think will work. You know, and you have to start from somewhere before you can actually start thinking about, you know, what's a good plan and what will work and what will not, so.
Okay, if we are set on that, on those pages, for you to go back and visit with Chance, I have a question that goes back to page 45, the chart, our lovely charts, where it comes down to District RN and District NC, which were previously office and professional, and then neighborhood service, which I don't know what that is, but at any rate, office and professional is NC. I was speaking with Nancy the other day, and I said, okay, because right now, all our impervious cover is 35%, which seems to work okay with residential, but does not with office and professional, and has not. Because I asked her, Nancy, of all the buildings that have gone in on 2252 on, is that the west side, the south side? Which side? The one side it's on.
This side.
Yeah, that side, okay. I
That's
said,
where the buildings are.
has there been an issue with impervious cover being at 35? And she said, yes. There isn't a single building that's been put on there that's 35. Every single one of them has come for a variance and has gotten it, which leads me to believe 35 isn't right then, okay? Not for the RN or the NC two levels. Because I asked her, she said, oh, absolutely, it is not correct. Well, then why are we keeping it at 35? You know, she said we probably, as a good start, look at, to bring to city council, look at maybe 45 for those two levels. And because that, she knows they've gone as high as, in the past, maybe, I know for sure there's one that's 48%
Yeah, they
variance.
haven't gone over 50.
Right, they haven't gone over 50. You're absolutely correct. One is close, 48, but not, gone over 50. So I'm thinking, why are we putting this not Chance, but Freese and Nichols had actually raised the numbers on the, when you're going into the newer, the neighborhood commercial, community commercial, the mixed use, I think, or whatever, and they had raised the numbers. And then I think we went back and said, wait a minute, no, those aren't the numbers. But I think there is something to say with the fact that they raised the numbers. And in speaking to Nancy, I would like to suggest that we submit that these residential neighborhood, neighborhood commercial, because those are the previous office and professional and neighborhood service, because I'm looking at the chart on page 11 that says these are the new names, these were the old names. That maybe we go in with a 45% impervious cover.
And the chart shows we reduced it to 35.
Well, it's been 35, okay? Chance and them moved it to 60, 55, 55, and all that. And then we went back and said, oh, no, and now I'm like, oh, well, no wonder.
I was of the impression we moved it back because we're gonna use it as an incentive
For the points.
for the points. That's what I
That's
thought.
what we did.
And
I
that's
think
what-
you're
yeah.
right there.
See, you know what I'm
Okay,
saying?
but
So if we throw
now-
out the point system, we can go back to the 65 and 55. That's the way I looked at it, Karen.
Because of the points.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's-
Okay,
that's what
but,
it
all right, how do you get points?
By doing other things.
And then, oh, but you can get more points,
be a
but how
good
did you get the
That
original?
would be a good incentive.
Yeah, it would.
Not if they sue us on it, because the way I was looking at this, we say 35 is impervious cover for these areas. Somebody can come back to us, because it's out, the information's out there. That's our standard, really? There isn't a single building out there that meets the standard. We've always, given variances, and they're quite higher than 35. And then here's another thing. We're saying, once we get this document done, we should have very few variances. Well, that's a problem.
But that raises another point. I don't want to Terry, from what you're saying, but this raises another point, because I remember we had this big discussion, and we made this chart based upon that point system.
We didn't
So-
have it yet.
No, we were going over through the ordinance, and we were looking at that point system, and we looked at that point system in relation to building this chart to match that point system.
No, it doesn't, because
No.
the most you can get, I did
No.
the math.
I know, but listen, what I'm saying is we made this chart based upon this point system ordinance that we just struck out. So we were looking at this for incentive. If you see that they've done that, the building maximum coverage and the impervious cover, we had them change all that for that part of the ordinance that we just struck out that we don't want when we were doing that. I don't
I
know.
don't know how we had them change anything, because this is the first we see this.
No. This chart, we saw this chart,
Yes, we did
and
see
we,
this.
and we did the part that we were just looking at with the points, and we were putting that together. One night we were putting it together, we went back and made this so that it could be achieved for points. We put the two together. Some
I
of
don't
y'all
have
may
any
not have
notes
been
on
here
that.
that
I
night.
don't either. I have.
But
no clue.
that's directly how this chart got
Okay,
changed.
so, but here's the thing. The originals, where it says 60, 55,
Yes.
55, et cetera.
It needs to be
Even when
raised.
you use what the new thing in here, level 2 design, level 1 design, the maximum points that you could get is, I think it's 20 extra points, for like impervious cover. Okay, that's on B, that's 73, B, number, I3, or 3 I's. Granting of an additional 20% of impervious cover. Well, when you do the math, that doesn't bring you to 55 or 60 or 65. You see, that's what I'm saying. These don't match up, number one, and we just had them go back to the original. And what I'm saying is the original is obsolete, because we do not have a standard in the old office and professional and the neighborhood service.
I think our instructions to Freeze and Nichols was that we realized they were obsolete. We realized some of the things that you pointed out, that we kept giving these variances of a higher percentage over the years. And so we said we wanted to raise them, and then we raised them. And then after we raised them, the House bill came out, and we said we wanted to go back to the original thing so we can use those numbers as an incentive for points. That's the only reason they changed it, because otherwise we, yeah. And that may be it, because I know we realized, we realized, we were we were on the wrong track with the numbers we had, and we changed them. And then when we changed them back after the House bill came out, because we said, yeah, and because we said we leave them where they are so we can use these as an incentive. And what they've come up with is not acceptable to us. That's okay?
Right, I just say it's not acceptable.
It's not acceptable to us. And we want to see what else they got and want to know the background of it. So I think this is probably going to change. I think it will change, okay? And some of the other things are going to change. But I don't want to get bogged down with the numbers in there, because we recognized they were wrong. And we wanted to change them, and we backtracked on it, groping, for lack of a better word, groping for a way to try to get some points and try to get within what we wanted and make it fit in with House Bill 2439. And that's why the numbers were all over the back. So they're crossed out now. They probably very likely will be going back to somewhere in there where Nancy can guide us and say, look, the least we've got is 48%. It has to be 50, unless we decide the point system is viable, which we don't think is going to happen. So yeah, I acknowledge that they're too tight, and we're making work for ourselves if we leave them like that.
Well, we're making.
Because we're going to have to do variances. That's the whole point, is not to have the variance.
We should not be doing variances
Exactly.
after we get through them.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
All right, good deal.
Anybody got anything else?
I have a question on page 76 on E2A. Did we not take out the term mural from this page?
E2A.
76, page 76, 2A.
We did take out murals, I remember that.
We did, didn't we?
Yeah, we just dismissed it.
We had a big discussion about murals.
E2A, we still had murals in there, and that should have been deleted.
Right there.
E2A. Got it? Okay. What else you got, Karen?
I don't know. Okay, so then we're looking at the same thing for page, or are these the pages? pages 78 through 80, at least 81. Cynthia, those are other pages with points. On page 87,
Okay.
we had a question previously about LED. I don't see it referenced in here. I think, David, you were the one that said, what about LED? Those are the new,
Right.
that's the new stuff coming out.
Right.
A picture of it, isn't it? This LED on page 86. Isn't that thing at the top of, yeah, the LED right there?
I think 87 is just to show the design, what kind of light is in there, doesn't really matter.
See that picture, that black thing? on the top?
Okay.
That's the LED light.
Okay, so do we need to say, I mean, I think David's question months ago was, do we need to reference, or, and I don't know if it's in here or not.
So did you put LED lighting in that section, or did you add it? I don't, it was supposed to have been added.
I had a question, yeah, 'cause I thought we had said it needs to be referenced somewhere.
You search for LED.
I have a note here.
Was it referenced in a picture, or was it referenced?
No, I think
The old one?
Commissioner
77.
Heyer said, what about
The
LED?
new one is 82.
That's where it stopped. Yeah.
Okay, Marissa, you can just say question mark?
Seems like I remember
Yes,
discussing it.
I know, I have a note that says LED question mark, no reference to LED lighting, why?
Right, right.
I can't remember if we got that answered or not. However, I know we talk about lighting in the nuisance ordinance.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
added,
Night light, the night, dark sky.
The dark skies.
Yep.
Wasn't it? Is it referenced in the dark sky ordinance?
we haven't passed an ordinance that discusses dark sky necessarily, but we added lighting, a whole section of lighting, pretty recently to the nuisance ordinance. I don't know if it talks about LED or not.
Well, it's just a question, because we did discuss it.
Well, this is in the building. Should we not put it into the building as a usable or non-usable source of lighting? Dave, can you answer that?
Commissioner Heyer?
Yeah, I'm trying to
Under new lighting, I guess?
specifically remember why we brought it up, and it's probably because we will reference other type of
Right.
lighting, and that wasn't mentioned.
Right.
That was the reason, but now I'm looking for,
Well, in 83, it talks about
Are
new
you
lighting.
looking at your old one? Because you probably made notes on the old.
It seems to be everything now is that, but now I understand that President Trump has passed use of regular light bulbs back into the industry, so it's no longer that you cannot use the regular incandescent light bulbs. So, you know, there for a while, they were phasing all that out, but I still think LEDs is the way to go in the new lighting for savings and lighting, but I don't see exactly where we should put that.
Well, it was just a question because it was in our comments in the old one, but it's not in the new.
Well, there's all kinds of pictures in here of things that are acceptable and unacceptable. We should just have a picture in there. There's some downlighting.
Okay. Moving on, I have another question.
Go ahead.
On page 95, we had a discussion about small wind energy system. And we made on on page 95, number 2A, it says a small wind energy system is allowed as an accessory use in all zoning districts. Our language previously was we struck small, and we said is not allowed and a prohibited use in all zoning districts. Those are my notes from the previous.
So you're saying, should say what, Karen?
A wind energy system is not allowed as an accessory use and prohibited in all zoning districts.
And strike the word small,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
it's not descriptive.
I have that same comment, but then I have next to it in all caps, just delete this section.
Yes, and you know what? My next comment was gonna be, we previously struck this whole page.
I have-
Yeah,
that's my-
exactly, Marissa.
Right.
That's my symbol for delete.
We said, no, all this height and stuff no, we just struck the whole thing.
Yeah,
Right.
I see it now.
So you're talking about small energy systems were struck?
Number 2, small wind
Or the
energy
whole
systems,
section.
we struck the whole section.
You're saying the whole section 2.06.11?
Just two.
Two, number
Or just
2,
Okay.
on page 95 and 96.
I'm asking for clarification. That's what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
95 and 96, we struck it.
Okay.
So, what about the alternative entry system? We allowed that part, we just struck number 2, is that correct? I think that
Yes, because we do have solar,
small.
yes, in residential areas,
So
and
what was the description for small solar energy? Small doesn't tell you anything
versus big, I don't know.
versus big.
I don't know. Yeah, we did strike number 2, the whole thing. And the top of page 97,
Right.
Yeah, it's all.
all the way to
All the way to B.
Rainwater.
rainwater and gray water. And then we also said under B, rainwater, and gray water harvesting, question for freezing nickel, zoning requirements, size limitations, and placement.
Yep.
And I don't think there's anything like that is referenced in here.
So they need to relook that
Yes.
whole section.
Yeah,
Right.
Be the zero, the
Marissa, did you have any notes on that? Okay,
I have that.
I have asked Friends and Nichols.
yeah. Question on page 100, under sidewalk location, design, and construction. Number 1, sidewalks shall be constructed for both sides of all public streets within a subdivision. We don't have any,
That's right. I had that note also.
I have to delete.
huh?
I have to strike out or delete.
Yes, we have previously struck number 1.
Yep.
I'm a little bit confused on that one. Can you?
We don't have sidewalks in
Any
Right.
subdivision.
But-
any subdivision.
Right, but going forward with
Well,
the
okay, maybe
development
it
of
needs to
this.
say that, going forward, or,
On both sides?
and it says on both sides.
Within a
well-
subdivision.
Okay,
Public street, so it wouldn't even necessarily be in a gated community, but in the city of Garden Ridge, like in,
right. So I don't think that we actually have to denote that's going forward because that's just the general nature of how an ordinance works. So
Okay. when it's passed from here on, okay, great.
that goes forward, so.
Right.
So is the intention that we don't want new developments to have sidewalks or we do?
Well, I thought we were adding those in the streets, in the new construction, we were adding, in our new thoroughfares, we're having bike lanes
Well,
and
that's
sidewalks.
not in a
So that,
subdivision.
but that would be, but in the public street, along public streets, but this is only in a subdivision.
Within a subdivision.
So that would be in the new subdivision such as the quarry being built or any annexation that was being built. And that would be different than the character of Garden Ridge is now.
Yeah. I don't
Just a
know.
comment.
Well, there are some tracks, a few tracks left in the city that, other than the quarry, that could support a housing development.
With sidewalks on both sides.
I mean, if that's what we
Unless
want.
they're a gated community, then we can't tell
Well,
them that anyway.
Right. Well, we could. I mean,
Cynthia, your recommendation on this is
just leave it.
Right.
I,
Yeah, right, because I think the idea is that, you know, new developments, we want them to have,
yeah, I mean, if it's in here, a gated community would have to have sidewalks.
right, because the reason we don't touch gated communities right now is because there were agreements many, many
Yeah,
years
we're
ago
grandfathered.
that had those remain as
Right.
private streets, not city streets.
Well, right, and I think that's still, isn't that still the, law, I mean, our.
Yeah.
Right.
HOA.
HOAs.
Right.
Private streets, and so the city cannot tell them, because the HOA owns the streets.
Right, but they would also own the sidewalks. I mean,
I
going,
know, but how do we tell them they have to have them on both sides, if that's their private property and?
well, just like you tell them how wide the streets have to be and everything else.
Right, right,
All right,
right.
all right, very good.
Criteria.
So they must be installed in the right of way, they have to do it within the HOA?
They would
No,
have to go in.
No, so remember, an ordinance only goes prospectively, it never goes retroactively. So whatever's here is here. So when this ordinance gets adopted, you know, any new subdivisions, you know, any new HOAs that get developed, you know, those things are gonna have to comply with the new ordinance.
Do they have to have sidewalks?
And if we put in here, we want sidewalks on both sides of the streets, then that's what, you know, that's what they're gonna ask. Right, right.
Because that reminds me, I think there's also something in here about mailboxes that have to be a certain way, but we have mailboxes all different designs, so that,
And they have to be
same thing applies
clustered
then.
down.
Yeah, okay, thank you for the
Yeah.
clarification.
Yes.
That takes care of
Well-
that question.
Before we leave sidewalks, do we really want to force people to have sidewalks? I mean, really? That's an extra cost to the developer. Well, no, they're asking us. I mean, well, it's us, we're supposed to advise them. They can do what they want. So I
The city
think
is,
we've
the
got
city,
along fine
yeah,
without
yeah,
sidewalks.
the city's functioning very well without
Without.
sidewalk.
I think it separates the city, any new development, it completely separate the city design, look, feel from the rest of the city. So I'm not for it, but that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, so I would suggest we don't have it as a requirement going forward.
Yeah.
Just, can we delete the whole section, 2.06.12?
What page is it start,
It's
Dave?
on page 99. Right at the bottom, 99 is where the annotation sidewalks is. And then you flip, so, and it goes over to page 101. So if we don't want sidewalks, we shouldn't have it in there, is the point.
Well, there is some consideration that I haven't dovetailed it in with our park plan and walkway and walk paths through the area. You know, I don't know what that all entails, whether if we have new developments, whether the development would still give people walking access, you know, if this,
Not
New-
if it's an HOA, it wouldn't. If
Pardon?
it's a gated community, it
oh, it
wouldn't.
doesn't make any difference. They just walk right through the HOAs, right into private developments and everything now. So, you know, they just walk right through the gates. It doesn't seem to bother people now. It's just a gate that's open. Bothers me because the HOAs don't, you know, they don't shut the gates and they come in and out. So, I mean, the walk paths are part of the city, but there was a plan in place to do that. You know, like down through Bat Cave, they were gonna do that and go down out through Chantal, but none of that hasn't been put in place yet. So we had some designated walkways, but that's never been developed. So if we keep sidewalks in, would they use the sidewalks? I mean, is that gonna be, could be connected into that? I don't know. I haven't looked at the new pathways, so there's some.
So the question is, what do we do?
Going forward, if we have a requirement for sidewalks, they're gonna have to build sidewalks, whether it hooks up with a park or anything else. I mean, and it sounds like we almost had a consensus that we don't want sidewalks.
Well, do we have curbs? I mean, would there be
We
curbs
have
in?
ribbon curbs.
Just, so it's just a ribbon curb.
That's the ribbon curb.
Kermit?
And
What do you
that's not
think?
even everywhere. That's, you know, There's
You're in a
plenty
new-
of places that don't have curbs at all.
Yeah, you're in a new development over there. What is your comment on that?
In our new development, we have, the angled curb.
Ribbon,
It's the
scoop,
ribbon.
ribbon?
The ribbon is flat.
Ribbon's
Almost flat.
flat.
You have the
Yeah, we have the one that's sort of angled,
Right.
concave or
concave.
convex?
I mean, there
concave?
hasn't been any issues. I personally like it because it doesn't allow cars to go in that, in the yard.
They park right there on
They-
the
They
street,
park on the street.
and they walk in the street edge instead?
Yes.
Would they prefer in that area, since you're seeing that traffic over there, would you prefer they had a sidewalk instead of
Uh,
rocks?
No, it
Mhm.
just changes the look if you have sidewalks.
Then you have to maintain them.
Maintain them
More
and,
edging.
Keep them clean, keep the grass out, yeah.
and big cost to the HOA. I mean, ultimately, that would fall on the HOA. And
So you'd prefer not to have,
I prefer not to
Yeah.
have sidewalks.
I'm trying to think, part C on page 100, excuse me, not part C, it's a B actually, no, it's C, I'm sorry. Been there too long. Properties along Texas Department of Transportation System roadways, that's what's giving me trouble. The expansion of 2252 is giving me trouble with the sidewalk thing. Because they're gonna have I don't think they're calling them sidewalks, but they're calling them, what? The shared use path or a
right.
recreational path.
Yeah.
And so if we eliminate sidewalks, are we impacting that?
No.
Which I know we can't
Impact that.
impact it at all. And so that's why I'm hesitant to say, okay, let's get rid of sidewalks.
Well, that's
Everybody
a
read-
state right away, a state road, and
Yeah.
they're gonna do whatever they wanna do on their property.
Right.
We can't say anything about it, unfortunately. But we're talking about within the city limits where we can say something about it, so do we wanna have sidewalks or not? And that would refer back to B, right above it, applicability, shall be constructed along all lots adjoining dedicated streets, along major arterial lots or streets, blah, blah, blah. You can read it just like I do. So going forward, we'd be saying anyone who develops a property, they'd have to put in sidewalks, whether it's whether it's a gated community or not. And do we want to do that?
I'm thinking, do we want them to join up with what TxDOT does? You know what I'm saying? If we say they have to have them, then we're saying they have to join up with what TxDOT's gonna have them on that side of the street, as I recall.
But I don't know what you mean by
On one side.
join up. I
You're
mean,
gonna have on one side.
And I think the
I
side they're
don't
gonna
think
have them
anybody's,
on.
right. I mean, joining up is,
I thought it was on
do
this
you,
side.
I thought it was on this,
I thought it was on this side.
I thought it was on this side where the office buildings and stuff
Yeah,
already
That's
are.
where, I think that's where.
it is,
Yeah.
but you're, okay, then
Go
you
ahead.
get
I'm
into,
trying to hear what you're
then you
saying.
get into Bat Cave Road, which is county road.
Yeah.
Okay, we have no jurisdiction over that either.
Right.
So
That's right.
we're talking about what we have jurisdiction over, only that. And right now, there's a few pockets that could be developed in the city. There's some large parcels along Bat Cave Road, for instance. If someone were to sell them off, they could probably put a housing development in there. And we'd be saying that housing development, it might be 10 homes, it might be 100 homes, who knows, would have to have sidewalks. And that's whether it's a gated community or not. No, not on Bat Cave Road, that's not what I'm talking about.
That cave, yeah. Okay.
There's no more residential development that I can see along 2252, maybe,
Right.
but I don't think so.
But if you go, say, annexation
If you go up Bat Cave Road, it's probably possible, the quarry's possible, whenever that shuts down, but that's just about it.
50 years from now.
Yeah, 50 years from now. So really, I don't foresee anything joining up with the park trail system. It would just be like if Wildwind decided tomorrow that their HOA wanted to have sidewalks, well, they'd have sidewalks.
Not likely.
Not likely, but they could do it, and it'd have nothing to do with anything else except what they want to do.
So your proposal is to remove,
It sounds like that's what we're all talking about, so let's remove it.
I agree.
Just delete the whole section, and we don't have to worry about sidewalks. And for that matter, a developer, if they wanted to come in and they wanted to have sidewalks, they could probably do it. This is requiring them to do it.
So what is the consensus that we?
We strike the whole thing.
Strike?
Strike
sidewalk.
2.0612.
I agree.
Are you thoroughly confused, Marissa?
No? This is no? I wanted to have a discussion about something that crosses my eyes every time I look at it. Special use permits, conforming and non-conforming lots, structures, and uses.
What page are you on?
That's way back, and that's way down the line, and page 127 is special use permits. And there's something about them, I just see them, I know we've discussed them, and I know it's something that comes before the commission on a regular basis. And I think it's something we need to talk about a little bit. And I had nothing specific about it, but I wanted to see if anybody had any problems with it, with special use permits. It's only 2 pages,
It refers back to our infamous table.
127, yeah. And so we're gonna have to, yeah, it's in the table and everything. So somewhere down the line, we're gonna have to talk about special use permits, regulations and procedures. And that may be best for another meeting.
Yeah, maybe tie it to the,
Yeah, we tie it to
Table
what's
to the
going.
chart we're gonna look
Yeah.
at, with
Right.
the S and P and all that.
Yeah.
But if I could, Dr. Miller, just to give you just a little bit of food for thought.
Okay,
I'm going to give you a scenario that applies to special use permits, and I think it'll kind of help maybe solidify the concept in your brain. All right, so within the ordinance itself, we have certain areas that are designated residential and some are designated ag, and we've got all these differentiations. But then we also know that there is case law and there's law that says, a church is allowed to go into any district, and they are allowed by a special use permit. So special use permits are used for when a specific district doesn't have that use, but there is a use that is permissible by other law or some other form or function. So that's when a special use permit comes into the purview, for a review. So that's just kind of a little bit of food for thought to kind of get your head wrapped around special use permit. And so special use permit, it is, allows for a use of, within a district, and conditions are set on it, and it's an actual true permit. So it's not something that generally runs with the land, which would be as actual zoning change. So, if a church wants to go into a residential district, well, we say, okay, church, you are allowed there by law, but you must meet these conditions. You have to have, certain safety equipment, certain parking requirements, and meet certain, certain things. And so those were the conditions that you actually attach to a permit to allow them to go in into a particular area. So I don't know if that was helpful or not, but that's generally the scope of a special use permit.
the specific question, specific sentence that gave me problems was on page 128, E1, special use permit expiration, and A says a special use permit shall automatically expire upon change in ownership. And that gave me problems.
And so how the law treats that is that if someone is purchasing a building or something that is there by special use, they generally take knowing that, and then, if they want to continue the use, then that person must come forward, for their permit. If they want to change the use, then there are certain things that they need to do. But we can take a look at that a little bit more closely, since that's the provision that's giving you some issues, giving you some heartburn.
Yeah.
But that's not too far off base how most cities treat special uses.
And the other one was page 137, which was the non-conforming lots, structures, and uses. At the top of the page, number 5, was non-compliance of off-street parking requirements. And further down in that section in B, it says, this requirement does not apply if a zoning special exception or alternative compliance has been granted for a reduced parking requirement. And just sounds like it's convoluted. And maybe it's better for another discussion another time, because when I read through it, I may have been tired by the time I got to this page, and just couldn't sort it out. But it seems like it's non-compliance, but then if you have a zoning special exception, we can get around it, or an alternative compliance, we can get around it. So maybe it's better discussed at another time. I just had it written down, the things that I wanted to look at. Anybody got anything else that jumped out at them, or we're gonna tackle the charts? Okay.
Page 71,
Okay.
2.06.07, where it talks about storage and use of vehicles in a residential zoning, A. It doesn't talk about like if a lot is on a corner where that RV or trailer boat needs to be, it talks about that it has to be parked behind the front of the building line. But what about if it's on a corner lot and they park it on the side, like in their property, but behind the building, but it's still visible from the street?
I think we had that discussion that it would be almost impossible to make them invisible.
Yeah.
Even if it was behind the fence or wherever.
Okay.
They're so large.
And therefore, they're not allowed.
No, they are allowed. They're allowed behind the front plane of the
But
property.
it says, when
Regardless.
concealed.
Yeah, that's, concealed shouldn't be in there. We talked about that a
I
long
just said,
time ago.
I have it underlined, shall not be parked in a residential zoning district. Because it says, except when concealed
Right,
from view.
right.
From view.
I think one thing to cover,
We talked about that a long time ago. We can't, there's so many people with RVs, no one's in compliance in the city.
Then they get a storage unit. I think that they don't want in residential district, everybody and their brother having an RV that can be seen from the street. I think that's the point here.
Point taken,
there are out there.
but they are all over the place out there now, and I don't think we're,
You know, the interesting thing is, yeah, and it's probably more so in the city, because I know in the HOAs, they're not allowed.
well, that's the HOAs, that's
I
different.
understand.
David did not live in an HOA.
Right.
Okay, well, but, so what are you saying here? I think if you still say that they're not to be parked unless concealed, even though they're doing it, I think there's something to.
The point is you can't conceal them.
Too big, yeah.
You can't conceal them. It's impossible. So you're saying they can't be on the property at all?
Well, if you can't conceal it, that's what it says here.
But that's what we've already discussed in the past and decided to take that out, that requirement out.
We have it taken out. What page is it on the old? Because the pages don't line up.
Right. Like it's 69 maybe, and 70?
What?
69 and 70.
In the
Starts on
old, in the old
The
one?
old one. Starts on 69, goes to 70.
I'm confused as to what you guys think it should say.
It should, what I thought we agreed on, this goes back a pretty long way, is that you can have an RV parked in your driveway and other places, but to keep it simple up front, you can have it in your driveway as long as it's behind the front plane of your property. In other words, it can't be in a circular driveway in front of your house. It can be at the side of your house or at the rear of your house. If it's at the rear of your house, it's in your backyard. It has to be on concrete. It can't be just parked in the grass. There has to be a parking pad for it. But we realized that, I mean, there's people with 40-foot RVs. You cannot conceal those things. So it was inappropriate to suggest that you could, and that's why we decided to take it out.
Well, only note I have is that they should not be stored, instead of the word not be parked, not be stored.
So it could be there temporarily.
Yeah, they have to be there temporarily
To
sometime
unload,
to take
unload,
care
Yeah,
of it.
yeah, I don't recall that at all. I mean, you may have not want that, but I don't recall us agreeing that they can't be here at all. Because they're all over the place.
Well, shouldn't this be more of a positive statement instead of says shall not be parked except, shouldn't it just say shall only be parked when concealed in view?
It can't be that's the point, you can't conceal them.
I guess in,
Well, my comment is, why does it say shall not be parked? Maybe the following shall only be parked except when concealed in view on the side, the fifth of the sentence. It's kind of connotation that shall not be parked. I guess it's fine.
that's not, David is saying, why do we have that when already there are numerous RVs parked in probably the non-HOA section of Garden Ridge, because they're already there. And I know one, I can't think of the street, but I know one where there's this big RV just, and they have like a carport for it. Yeah, that's it.
Our former mayor has one.
Well, but why don't you just say it declarative? It shall only be parked with concealed from view in a garage or parked on the front building. Why don't you say the positive?
So my question, Marissa, do you know, is this currently in our ordinance?
No. Well, I can't say that.
Currently, our ordinance is somewhat similar to this, and it talks about that they must be concealed. Concealed meaning you can't be parked in front of, I don't know if it uses the wording here that says building line or if it's the front plane. I can tell you from being experienced in the police department, some people don't care.
Yeah.
You
I
can
mean,
give
even
them
that would
citation
say-
after citation, and they're not gonna move it.
If the front yard, parked in the front yard.
Well, they have it, there's that one that's dry, if you see the front of the house, it's parked right next to it. And it's not concealed at all.
So, I mean, this reads that
Here's
It-
what it says. It says concealed, so if you had a big 40-foot bay in your garage, to put a 40-foot, it's concealed. It says concealed or parked behind the front building line of the primary dwelling. It's or.
Well, I'm just talking.
That's what it currently says. What did the,
Right.
what is, no, that's the new one.
That's what we agreed on in here.
Okay.
our current ordinance that's in place right now says something similar. I know that they're not supposed to be parked any further than, I think it says the front plane.
Yeah, the front plane of the property.
Right,
So if you have a circular driveway, you can't park it out in front of your front door.
right.
Okay, you can park it on the side.
And it has to be parked
or
on
you can park it in
a
the back, but you can't
paved.
park it in your yard if, you can't just
On the grass.
put it on the grass. You have to have a pad back there for,
Well, okay, so, because this goes on beyond the recreational vehicles and talks about trailers and boats
right,
and
same thing. It says,
farm vehicles.
So we have some houses that are grandfathered garages that face the street on the corner.
there's plenty of
I
them.
know, yeah. And I think that's what you brought up.
Right.
So, they can be parked on a those that have the garage on the corner facing the street, you could park it behind the front light, the front face of the house and still be facing the street. because it's on a corner.
Right.
Now, the new, corner ordinance says where you have the driveway, the garage has to face an inside lot, lot line, not the street. That's covered then. You can be behind. It's those other ones that are the few houses that have the corner garage facing the street.
But are they grandfathered, and is this for going forward?
They're grandfathered for the garage side. This is what I'm bringing up here is that, how do you address those?
And so I'm gonna jump in here one more time. Remember, everything that's existing
Right,
is
yeah.
grandfathered.
But I'm just talking about if you how do you can still park that RV in the driveway then, and you're not past the front line of the house. Because in the driveway, it's facing the side street. So, know
What,
what's at issue or not.
what do we collectively want this sentence to say?
I think
There's always gonna be exceptions.
I'm fine with the way it says it right there.
you're okay with it?
I think going forward, it's fine the way it is.
Okay.
So let's leave it the way it is and move on to something else.
Okay. Okay, so on that same page, I brought one more in the mailbox up again. The very bottom, paragraph C, mailboxes. Builders shall construct mailboxes in the same masonry material as the primary building.
And can we enforce that? Can we enforce that now?
If you're not gonna have
In
masonry.
the building, we can't force them to make the mailbox the same way.
I mean, if they have those.
How about the screening? I remember the section on screening of things. I said the same thing. Can we force them to have the screening match the building if the
Right.
building doesn't have to be screening of the air conditioners or in the
Right,
commercial
yeah.
areas is supposed to, you can't have a wooden fence and the building is, cut stone. So, I mean, does that law limit us?
Take out the word masonry.
And take out the
Say
way,
material.
Yeah, I guess you couldn't say that.
and just take out masonry, it takes care of it, you're right.
Yeah.
Let's take out masonry. Thank you, Karen.
Whether the law changes one way or the other, it's still correct.
Yeah.
The old masonry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't even wanna go there. Multiple different houses made out of multiple different materials. What do you mean?
On page
gonna be-
72,
Say again?
Striking all that for now,
oh,
Say-
she's
say-
gonna
yeah.
speak to 72 through 70,
The point thing?
Yeah.
Oh, that's gonna be,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
So all that's gonna be,
There is some stuff about the post office boxes.
That's on the other,
where is it?
where, oh, well,
Oh.
up here too, it says, well, yeah,
I wasn't sure if it's.
exception. Oh, I thought you was talking about that.
You still have some.
No, I don't.
What I was talking about is on page 55,
55.
at the bottom. Screening required. No, 55,
Screen.
bottom of page 55, number 3. Refuse containers, trash dumpsters / containers, trash compactors, box compactors, and other similar containers shall be enclosed on all 4 sides with a 3-sided masonry screening wall and a metal gate on the 4th side that shall be constructed to a minimum of
That means your trash cans have to.
yada, yada, yada. So
No, it's just,
I think we have to take masonry out of that one too.
If you read it, I think it applies to everything. It says trash receptacles.
I'm gonna flag that one for me to go back
That's for
and double check, cause
non-residents.
I don't know that I've even
Non-residents?
thought
Yeah.
about
further up on that.
the screening requirements, if those are encapsulated within the legislation.
Okay.
But if that's me to take the word masonry out, it's still good.
Okay.
That's all I had written down before my eyes sufficiently crossed that I couldn't read anymore. Does anybody else have anything for tonight? We'll go next time, or anything else we want to discuss tonight? We're looking at 2.5 hours. We're going on 2.5 hours.
I don't,
Beating this horse, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
yeah. Yeah. Anybody else have anything else? Okay, so we're getting back on track with the,
Instead of taking weeks, at least tomorrow.
yeah. Business item 5C then, future agenda items. Well, one of them is gonna be, look at that chart stuff. And I think those charts, am I out of line to say that we won't be discussing that next time? Because next time we'll be discussing, the variances and stuff?
Correct. Your meeting on the 20th will not have this ordinance on it. It will only be based on the variances and the special use permit and holding public hearings for that.
Okay, so help me, Marissa, the next meeting after that is,
It's going to be Tuesday, March 10th. Second Tuesday, so March 10th.
it's our next meeting where we can discuss the chart. No,
10 March.
no. Okay,
So that's, the chart you're referring to is 2.0505. Is that what you're
I didn't know, I can't remember the name.
Page
the
Yeah.
name.
25,
Page 25. Yeah, and
or whatever else we have
whoever else.
on, from the point thing.
Yeah,
It's use regulations.
so help me, Melissa, with, Marissa, excuse me, not Melissa. Marissa, help me with the agenda for the next meeting. I keep hearing reference to a joint meeting, but I don't have visibility of that. I don't know anything about it.
So there will be your regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting at 6.
Okay.
Since the resolution doesn't go into effect until March, we wanted to keep that second meeting
Okay.
as a regular meeting. Then at 7 PM, there will be a city council special meeting. The agendas will be separate, they will be separate meetings, but they will have the same things on the agendas because Planning and Zoning Commission has to hold their own public hearings for a variance and a special use permit, close their meeting. City council will then have to hold their own public hearings for same variance and special use permit, make their decision, close their meeting. So it's not a joint meeting, they're two separate meetings on the same day, back to back.
I'm trying to hear, what I'm hearing you say, though, we must or should be in attendance. We have to be in attendance for the first one, the way I hear it, from 6 to
Right.
7.
Yes, at 6 to whenever y'all finish
Uh-huh,
is y'all's meeting.
okay,
After that, you aren't required to
Only
be in
the chair has
attendance. However, the chair or someone that he designates should be in attendance to give the
okay.
recommendation.
That's what I wanted to hear, yeah.
Lucky you.
I don't know if we can limit ours, we'll see what the variances and special use, what you call say are. I don't have the agenda for that yet. Have you published that yet?
The agenda will probably be posted tomorrow.
Okay.
Packet shortly after, or waiting on a couple minor questions to be answered.
So we're saying Thursday, we could have our packet? For the packet for the next Thursday's meeting? Let me ask it a different way. When will our packet be available for us to look at?
Definitely by the end of this week.
Okay.
I would say Thursday would be better, so that y'all have all day Friday to come pick it up. You will have large documents that we're gonna print on 11 by 17 paper because they're hard to read otherwise.
Okay. And
But-
so we probably can pick it up on Friday.
Right.
It gives us all next week to look at it,
Right.
pending a meeting at 6 o'clock on Thursday, which will be followed by a special city council meeting at 7.
And the city council meeting can start later than 7.
Oh, yeah, but I'm saying.
They can't start earlier.
Yeah.
That's why we put it at 7. So if
Okay.
y'all are still in your meeting and the public hearings last a while, that's okay. It just, We put 7 because you can start later than that. We can't start earlier. We aren't sure how long those will be, but that will be the only agenda items. This ordinance won't be on here. Ordinance 210 won't be on here.
Okay, what I want to make, I don't want to be difficult, or I don't want to be slow or more than anything else. I just want to be absolutely clear. We're having the meeting at 6, followed by a public hearing, or within that meeting is going to be a public hearing. And that's
2.
why I couldn't, I'm sorry,
2 separate public hearings.
in our meeting.
Yes,
So it'll be 2 separate public meetings in our meeting.
yes.
And then, when we're finished, then city council will be considering pretty much the same thing, and they're gonna have 2 separate public hearings. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. I kept hearing all these public hearings, okay. Now I think I got it. Well, not officially. When we get the packet, we'll know, okay?
And we've already posted the notices in the newspaper, because those are required to be done, so we've published about them. Your agenda, I would say I will be posted tomorrow. I've worked on it today.
Okay, okay, because I'm like Ms. Owens, I know a little bit about, from rumors and talking to people in City Hall, and for the last year, we've been dealing with this issue to a certain extent, but I have nothing official in front of me that I can say, this is what we're gonna be discussing, Ms. Owens. That's why I'm so vague, because I'm vague too. I know a little bit, but not a lot.
She said there's 2 public hearings and then I'll go to the
What's
other.
up? Yes, yeah. Anybody else have any questions about the flow of things next Thursday?
No question, I've told you in the past, I won't not be here that day, so I already told
Okay, that's
Marissa,
right.
so.
Dave, I don't know, I can check with Dave. I don't know, I'm not sure. Will that present a problem? We'll have 2 people gone, we'll have 1, 2, will we have a quorum? Yes, we'll still have a quorum, thank God, yes.
And that is why we made the resolution effective in March.
Yeah, I'll check with Dave, make sure Dave's gonna be here, just so it's not even close. Because I hate to go through all this and then, everything.
I got my.
Anything else for the agenda for next week? Marissa's taking care of most of it. Is there anything that we feel is very important that we need to discuss, as well as the things that have been planned for us on our agenda? Okay.
I have a question about getting this back for corrections, are we just gonna wait till March to go over the, for this hearing, or we're gonna go over the charts? What's the plan?
In terms, by saying turn it in, you mean will Marissa will go forward with the collections?
What's our plan going forward?
My feeling is, as chair, that there's no rush now, okay? I don't want to rush because I want to get it right, since they made all the changes. And we've been fooling around with this. I know it was June of 2018 when we had when we first started talking about, hey, we got to get this done, we got to get this done. So I see no reason now, here it is March, it'll be March 2020, to rush anything, okay? So I think what I'm saying to you, Ms. Owens, is we're gonna play it by ear. Let's look at the charts, give the direction to the city secretary, and then keep our fingers crossed that Chance can get to it sometime in the next 6 months or whatever, and get it back to us, so we can get back with city council and pass it on, and say, this is what we got, what do you guys think?
Well, city attorney, you gotta work with, on the points, right? You gotta
Yeah, we're
do
gonna
some
look at
work
all
on
that,
that.
yeah.
Right. Also,
By
yeah.
March, what is it, March
I know
10th?
it's back in March, maybe in April, we'll be able to put it together, do you think, April by that timeframe?
Yeah, I'm not gonna let you back me to the wall, Ms. Owens. I'm not going there.
By the time they get their, input, and then we get that back to what I'm in the meeting, then, another meeting or 2, so maybe by May or June, we could be done with it. That's what
So-
I hope.
I would hope so too.
I just wonder, do we know if Freeze and Nichols is on any type of time contract constraint?
I have no visibility of that all, what's it all?
They're on the,
If we had a time, or we had a service.
we don't know, so that
We
would be
don't
a
know.
consideration.
We have Nancy, maybe next week Nancy can fill us in on some of that.
I don't believe it's a time limit contract, but we pay them for their time that they put in.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
But in the budget, we had to have a line item
Right,
for,
Right.
so we
There- we
know
do-
that's, we know we have
we
to do
do
it
have
by
a-
August.
We do have a budget.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna go back to them until we finish this next chart that we proposing.
I'm sorry?
We're not gonna go back to them until we finish this next chart for review, and we get the input from them and on the, point system.
That's the way I understand it, yeah. That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
Other questions? Then we're moving into,
Just for another agenda items for future, do we want to have a discussion on how we're going to work with the HOAs and all that at some point? You know, with the masonry stuff, you know, with the,
see,
You
that
wanna
comes
wait
back to
till
the
that-
chart thing. If we go to a point, if we go to a point system, then we may need to look at that, working with the HOAs to figure out a way to get what we want here in the city. We may have to, in fact,
yeah. So
have
it's-
more outreach to the HOAs to get that stuff done.
So at some point, we need to have a discussion, whether it's in March or April, it doesn't matter. We just need,
Yeah.
at some point, need to have a discussion on how do we do that.
Yeah,
Okay, that's all I'm,
yeah.
Leave that on a running agenda.
Item number 6 then, citizen comment period. This is the citizen comment period that we limited to 20 minutes, and citizens can only talk for 2 minutes. Is anybody in the audience that wishes to comment on the proceedings here tonight? Thank you, Councilwoman Bauer. Thank you. Then I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned at 8:31. Thank you, gentlemen.